speaking of the website over at Bang the Book, a lot of great stuff going on. I've got situational betting articles up for the NBA, NHL, and college basketball. College football coming here this afternoon. Opening line reports for college football week 14 and NFL week 13. And, of course, my college football power ratings for this week as well, to go along with an NBA preview for tonight on Blazers and Bulls, college basketball preview for Butler and Missouri. So I've been a busy beaver here this morning getting a lot of stuff up. Make sure you head on over to the website and check that out, along with Parker Michaels' daily NHL picks and all the other stuff that we have going on over there right now. Finally, as you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio, presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. One guest, two segments, whole lot of fun here on this Monday edition of the show. Professional handicapper Kyle Hunter from HunterSportsPicks.com joins me. Kyle, how's it going today, man?
It's going well, man. Like you said, this is a really busy time of the year. I think this week's one of the roughest weeks as far as just so many different things going on with the holiday, and the sports world is about as busy as you get this week. So I've been on a really good run here of late, so it makes it a little bit easier to handle. But I have to tell you, you kind of get scrambled this time of the year.
Yeah, it certainly makes it easier to do the work when you're running pretty well, because, when you're not running well, you have to do the work, but it feels
Right.
like a little bit more of a slog. And, not even just the fact that we've got so much going on here. It's a week in college football where you've got all these rivalry games, so you can't really dismiss too much of the card. And then college basketball, you get a higher number of games because teams are playing back-to-backs and 3-3s with all these early season tournaments. So, there's no break for these teams. There's no break for us in this business.
That's right. You get these college basketball where generally you can kind of count on 1 or 2 days a week where there's hardly any games. This time of the year, basically every day is pretty busy. There's going to be a lot of neutral site games, even on those Monday and Fridays and things that are usually really low volume normally. So, yeah, really busy time of the year. You've got every single sport going on that you could imagine, just about other than baseball. Very busy time of the year. It's exciting from a fan standpoint. I do have to say that can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes as somebody who works in this industry, but this is just about the end for football, and we'll try to finish it strong here.
Well, and a quick heads up to our listeners before we dig too far into the college football first look here. I have yet to figure out what my plans are for the remainder of the week here. Tuesday and Wednesday should go off normally. I imagine I'll just do a Thursday show and just do, my 2 regular Friday segments here. I don't anticipate any changes to the schedule, but if something does get changed, I'll try to let you know with as much advance notice as possible. And Kyle, as we dig into college football here for week 14, obviously there's a lot to consider this week. You've got your power ratings still. They're still there. You're still trying to grab numbers, stuff like that. But bowl eligibility, division and conference implications, college football playoff implications, lame duck head coaches, couple of interim head coaches out there. Amazingly enough, we don't have any bowl or go home games this season where you've got a team with 5 wins playing a team with 5 wins. We don't have any of those this year, but man, the handicaps are just so much more detailed this week in college football than usual.
They are definitely, like you said, there's so much going on that you're trying to figure out, which way do I want to look at this? Do I want to look at this as, lame duck head coach? Does a team care about getting to a bowl game? What are the implications as far as the conference? Do they maybe want to spoil a rival's chance of winning the conference? Certainly that happens as well. I would say that in general, I'm a little bit more cautious with my plays on this week. I don't think my volume will be as high. Certainly on sides, I would be really careful. Totals, I may still play a decent amount of games, but I think that you have to be a little bit careful this time of the year. You've got so many different things going on, and I kind of think this is kind of like the stock market, where when there's a ton of unknown, it's a negative thing. Like you want to know what you think of a handicap and what you think the two teams will be motivated to do going into that game, and I think it can be a little bit hard in this week.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, you mentioned a lot of totals plays. This time of the year, weather can be a substantial factor. And in fact, there's going to be some wind moving across the country here throughout the week. Could affect some of the Friday and Saturday college football games on the East Coast. So, again, you got to factor that into the equation here too. So a lot of things to keep in mind here, but again, we'll try to sort through as much of it as we possibly can on this segment as well as throughout the week here. But a couple of notes you wanted to mention about games, at this time of the season here. And again, the regular season ending later than usual. I mean, usually, by this time we're looking at conference championship games, but the late Thanksgiving holiday, the way the calendar works, 2 byes for every team, things finishing up a little bit later on here.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of take a look at, if there are any angles that I could point out to listeners for this time of the year. I'll start off with saying I've really tried hard to find something on sides, favorites, underdogs, home and away. Really nothing here. You look at the last 15 years. Road teams have done a little bit better than home teams, but really that's the case overall in the season. So I don't think that's anything to do with, the last game of the season or anything. Home field advantage is a bit overrated, as we've said many times. I did want to point out that the last game of the regular season, with both teams with a win percentage of 60% or lower. So you're looking at teams that are at least not elite teams, not top level teams. The under is 56.3% since 2005. When you look at this, it's a little surprising to me that teams who are not great teams play a bunch of unders in the last game of the year. You would kind of think that, the over would do decent if two teams don't really care too much about the game. But maybe they just want to be done with the season, and you get a lot of unders. The other thing is what Adam just said a minute ago. This is about the biggest week where you're going to have a lot of weather games. So that could be affecting this quite a bit as well. And I don't think that this means that you want to play them more if it's a low total, but totals of 52.5 or lower in this week, in that situation that I just mentioned with teams of win percentage of 60% or lower, totals of 52.5 or lower are 68 and 39 to the under. So 63.6% unders. I think that's probably just it's not a big enough sample size to think that, why would you want to play a total that's lower on purpose? That one doesn't make sense to me. But I will say that the last week of the season, the under has done better than the over. I think that makes sense based on weather, as you said. And some of the bigger games between teams who are good teams who have a lot to play for, maybe these middle of the road teams with 50% win percentage or something like that this time of the year, they really do have a lot to play for. So the under has done pretty well in this week.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, we talk about, games where the pressure's kind of off, where there's really nothing on the line. Those generally do tend to be higher scoring, not just in, college sports, but in professional sports as well. So to hear that is definitely very surprising. But again, I do think weather certainly plays a role, in particular with what you talked about with very low totaled games. 52.5 isn't very low by any means, but, weather can be a big factor here at this time of the year. And like you said, maybe some teams just run the ball, want to get out, could just be everyone kind of mailing it in a little bit here at the end of the season. But something that is very interesting to look at year in and year out, and we'll talk about this in the context of the big game between Ohio State and that team up north here on Saturday, but Harbaugh hasn't been able to beat the Buckeyes. And there are some coaches out there that do struggle here late in the year in these big-time spotlight rivalry types of games. There are other head coaches that kind of thrive at this time of the year, and you wanted to mention some of those here today on the show.
Yeah, I did. I think it's interesting this time of the year. I think that, coaches can kind of separate themselves this time of the year. What can you do when you get to some of the biggest games against an opponent that knows you really well? Some of the best coaches really show up really well this time of the year, and some of the worst coaches can struggle quite a bit. Game 12 or 13 of the season, so not a bowl game. Coach's ATS record: Jeff Brom 7-0, 7-0 ATS. Certainly been really good. I think Brom is a really good coach. It'll be interesting to see how he does this year. Obviously, Purdue is not the same type of team that they've had in the past. Justin Fuente 7-1 ATS. That one's not real surprising either, based on Virginia Tech's success against Virginia, but obviously he did well even before Virginia Tech. Matt Rule's 6-1 ATS. Look, I think both of us agree Matt Rule's just a really good coach. And then on the other side, Mac Brown 2-8 ATS. Mike Leach 3-8 ATS. He's just been getting beat up in the Apple Cup, obviously. And then Kevin Sumlin 4-9 ATS. I got to be honest with you. I think that Kevin Sumlin is just pretty overrated as a coach.
I think so too. I think Kevin Sumlin is very overrated as a coach. That's an interesting little game there in the Territorial Cup between Arizona and Arizona State, with the Sun Devils coming off of that massive win
Yeah.
over Oregon. But Kevin Sumlin, I mean, he's not the guy there. And they're going with a 2 quarterback system. They've been swapping Tate out with Gunnell. It's really weird what they're doing down there in Tucson. But as you mentioned, Mike Leach, the last 6 games against Washington State has scored 15, 14, 17, 10, 13, and 17. All 6 wins by double digits for the Huskies. You're not going to do very well ATS in that last game if that's the results that you're coming up with. So the Apple Cup, very bad for Mike Leach here, a game I'm sure we'll talk about as we go throughout the rest of the season. I do want to talk real quickly here, excuse me, about the Egg Bowl. Actually, I want to talk about Tuesday night's game between Western Michigan and Northern Illinois very quickly. There are some games this week here where one team has everything to play for, and the other team has virtually nothing to play for. This is one of them. Western Michigan trying to win the MAC West, Northern Illinois not going to a bowl game. And that's very rare territory for the Huskies. They almost always go to a bowl game, usually wind up going to a pretty decent bowl game at that. This year, they're not going to. Keep an eye out for some of these games where the line may be a little bit inflated because one team has all the incentive, the other team has very little incentive. And also keep in mind that the team with everything to lose is the team that generally plays tighter in that game too.
Absolutely. I think that, this is a good example of what you were talking about with one team with a lot more to play for than the other team. However, it's still price dependent. This line at -7 is not a great value. You see 76% of the bets and 70% of the money on Western Michigan so far. I don't think this line's going to go down. I mean, will it go to 7.5? I don't know. I wouldn't think people would be too excited to bet Western Michigan having to win by 8. Northern Illinois has been disappointing. I don't think that, this new Northern Illinois coach walked into a great situation. They lost a lot of key players from last year. I don't think that we can judge this Northern Illinois coaching staff on this year alone. I think that Western Michigan is a team that, most people were pretty high on this year coming into the season. They had some key injuries. Losing Eskridge was a really key injury, and they've still been very good. So I'm pretty impressed with Western Michigan. I did want to mention here that the weather forecast right now looks very bad for this game. So keep an eye on the weather here, talking about maybe 20 miles per hour wind and some heavy rain. If that's the case, that'll definitely be something you want to monitor.
Yeah, and I don't know what the adjusted total looks like, but Circa opened this one 60.5 on Sunday. So we'll see what the offshore marketplace opens it. But if this one opens, low 60s, high 50s, maybe tough to get there with that weather forecast that you mentioned. Thursday night, Ole Miss and Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. This one, 2.5 or 3 reduced juice out there market wide. There's really not a whole lot of positive sentiment for Mississippi State out there in the market, and really there hasn't been for the most part here this season. Ole Miss can't go to a bowl game, but if you win the Egg Bowl, win the rivalry game, that's something that kind of saves your season a little bit. You've got a little bit of an opinion here on this Thursday night tilt.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I have a really strong opinion, but I kind of like Mississippi in this game. I would say that, Mississippi State, a team that I took a season win total under on, they're worse than I thought they were going to be. This is a Mississippi State team that is really disappointed. Mississippi State's defense, we knew they were going to be down from last year. There's no way they were going to be a top 10 defense, but they're 109th in the country in yards per play allowed. I definitely didn't think they were going to get that much worse. And Mississippi's offense has really been running the ball well here of late. 7th in yards per carry for the year. Plumlee's been very good. I think Mississippi is kind of just a sneaky team because they have good coordinators. I like their offensive and defensive coordinator. Mississippi State kind of backs into this game. They haven't been very good. To me, this is a game where both teams will be highly motivated. I don't think we have a motivational edge on one side or the other. But, you look at this one, and Mississippi is plus 0.22 yards per play. Mississippi State is minus 0.06 yards per play. So Mississippi has been a bit better than their record would indicate. And Mississippi State, is about what you would expect. So to me, this is one where I could only take Mississippi or pass. I'd want to get to 3 points, and it looks like, that one's going to keep going down. So if you like Mississippi, you probably want to play it pretty soon.
And something else that you have to try and factor into your handicap, and it's very, very hard to do, so it's not going to be the selling point for a play one way or another. But Ole Miss has a new athletic director, and he came out last week and gave Matt Luka a vote of confidence and kind of said, he's our coach now and for the future. And you wonder, I mean, coming off of what could be a 4-8 season, we'll see what happens here in this game. If he wins the Egg Bowl and goes 5-7, I mean, does that buy him another year? Is it just kind of the AD talking out of both sides of his mouth a little bit? We don't really know. But you do have situations like that where you wonder, do the Ole Miss players want to keep this guy around? Are they going to go out there and give a big effort for him? Or with some turnover in the athletic department, do they kind of look at it and say, well, let's maybe go out there and get a more proven type of coach? And maybe that resonates down to the players. I don't know. It's hard to read between the lines of those types of things. Maybe if you dig into some local newspapers, you could find some stuff out. And for Mississippi State, there was talk of Joe Moorhead maybe going to Rutgers or taking some sort of other position. They're a team that, just really hasn't hit much of a stride at any point this year. I think it's a tough game. I mean, my line is a little bit higher than the market. I probably haven't adjusted fast enough to Ole Miss and the dual threat nature of their offense now with Plumlee at quarterback, but not a game I'll probably have too much interest in with the standalone factor on Thursday night. But again, this is one of those games that sort of showcases all the different layers of the onion in week 14 of the college football season.
Yeah, definitely. I think and also, when this game is, it's, if I remember correctly, this is Thanksgiving night, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the only college game that night. So if you want some action, maybe this is one where you want to bet it small, something like that. I certainly don't advocate betting something big just because it's the only game on TV. But, if you want to bet a little bit of something because you want to watch it while you're coming down from your, Thanksgiving meal where you've, just been loaded up and now you're just laying on the couch, So the NFL games aren't tremendous, that game, to be totally honest with you. I mean, I don't know that anybody could be too terribly excited to watch Trubisky versus Driscoll in that first game or anything like that. So, maybe this is the best game to watch of the day, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I play board games with your family or something.
Right.
Do something else instead. All right, we go to Friday here, and oh boy, game 315, 316, Virginia Tech and Virginia. And coming into the season, it looked like this might be the year for Virginia to finally get Virginia Tech. It has been a long time coming, to say the least. Now, Virginia Tech, what a resurgence from Justin Fuente's team here. All of a sudden, they're a 2.5-point favorite in Charlottesville. Flip favorite situation for this early kickoff on Friday.
Yeah, this is a really complicated game. I have to tell you, Virginia before the season, a team that I was high on, took the season win total over. They did get to that. They're 8-3. I have to be honest, I think Virginia's been a little bit worse than I thought they would be, though. They're 5-1 ATS. They played well last week against Liberty. That was a bad spot for them. So, you could say that they're playing decent coming into this game, but they barely beat Georgia Tech the game before that. Virginia's had some no-shows. They struggled to beat Old Dominion earlier this year. I remember that game pretty well. Virginia is kind of an inconsistent team to me. Virginia Tech really looked bad there for a while. It's hard to imagine. I mean, you think back, you remember the game back in week 5 when they lost to Duke? I don't even know what the score was, but it was just an epic blowout in that game. It's hard to imagine that Virginia Tech lost to Duke the way they did, and then those two teams have played the way they have since then. That's really one of those games that just doesn't make any sense. And obviously, in college football, you're going to have games like that where you go back later and you say, how did that happen? But I think that's about the best example you could ever have of it. These two teams have played similar schedules. Look, the ACC is not very good. I think we all know that. Virginia Tech running the ball very heavily here of late, and I think that's important, especially if you want to bet a total in this game, to know that Virginia Tech went from passing the ball a decent amount at the beginning of the year to in ACC play, they are running it almost 68% of the time. So Virginia Tech, a very run-heavy offense. They've slowed things down. Their tempo is very slow here in the ACC play, almost 28 seconds between plays. This is a Virginia Tech team that I would look to play unders with. Virginia's defense is pretty good against the run, 21st in the nation. So I don't know what the circa total was on this one. If you could look that one up real quickly, but Honestly, I think the under could be a good play in this game because I think, Virginia is very up for a game like this. This is where Virginia has lost to them so many times that you think, man, this is a game that they had circled from last year. They want this game really badly. Virginia's offense is really not very good. They're 109th rushing. Perkins is a good quarterback, but he doesn't have a lot of great weapons around him. To me, this sets up as a pretty good underplay, but I'm a bit worried about how low the number is going to be here.
Circa popped this one at 49, so I guess we'll see what the offshore market winds up putting this one at. Look, 15 in a row for Virginia Tech, 19 of 20. So it has been a long time for the Cavaliers, to say the least. And again, coming into the season and really, early on in the year, you thought, oh, this is going to be Virginia's best shot. I think they have underwhelmed. I think Virginia Tech is a team that Clemson does not want to see in the ACC championship game. Virginia Tech will not beat Clemson. Clemson will be a big favorite in that game, but I think you can walk right over Virginia if that's who you wind up playing. If Virginia Tech wins this game, goes to Charlotte for that ACC title game, they're going to give Clemson a ball game, at least for a little while. And I think you'd much rather not have that if you're Clemson because you don't have anything to worry about for the college football playoffs. So there's also that. Not only is this the rivalry game, it also decides the winner of the Coastal Division. I've got to go Virginia Tech here. I mean, my line on the game is Virginia Tech +1, so I was closer to where the opener is. But Virginia Tech's playing well. Virginia hasn't done anything to impress me yet this year. It's the way I would have to go, with the line below 3, and it does look like we're going to get to Virginia Tech -3 here at some point.
Yeah, one other point that I wanted to make is that Virginia Tech is plus 0.61 yards per play, which is 42nd in yards per play margin. Virginia is plus 0.32, which is 63rd. So kind of goes to speak about what we were saying, that Virginia has been a bit underwhelming for an 8-3 team to be 63rd in yards per play margin. They really haven't been that great. So I think the line move here makes sense. I do like under, and I would like under 49 in that game. So honestly, I think the under could be a good play. Both of these defenses are playing really well. Bud Foster last year, that defense has really been tremendous here at the end of the season.
That's a big one too. Getting Bud Foster back to the ACC title game, should get a decent bowl game if you win your division. So it's motivating factors on both sides here, to be sure, in this rivalry game. And we can't say that about some of the other rivalry games that are coming up here, in particular on Saturday. But we stay on Friday. We go to game 331, 332, Cincinnati and Memphis. And these two teams very likely to play each other again next week in the AAC Conference Championship game. But as a buddy of mine pointed out, that group of 6 New Year's Bowl, or that group of 5 New Year's 6 Bowl bid, very much still on the line for both of these teams. So even though Cincinnati already in that conference championship game, they don't really want to lose here because it would take them out of the running for that New Year's 6 Bowl game. But they are a double-digit underdog here against Memphis.
Yeah, this is one where you and I talked about it a little bit here earlier this morning. I have to say that I would have wanted to bet Memphis in this game, but this line is almost exactly where I made the line. I was trying to be aggressive, wanting to play Memphis in this game, and I don't really think it's a good spot for Cincinnati. They've played a weak schedule, so is Memphis, obviously, but Cincinnati is really backing into this game. They were very fortunate to beat Temple. Desmond Ridder is clearly not 100%. Cincinnati being extremely conservative on offense here of late, trying to let their defense win the game. Let's be honest, this Memphis offense is really good, very explosive, 6th in the nation in yards per play. I mean, I would think that Cincinnati has to score some points to stay in this game, and I'm not sure Cincinnati can do it. I mean, you just look at what Cincinnati's been doing here of late. Their offense has been really, really weak. This is a passing game that is just not there at all. In the running game, it's becoming very predictable. You run 65% of the time, and you're only, mediocre at running the ball, and there's really no deep passing threat. Memphis's defense is not a great defense, but they're a lot better than they were a few years ago. This is something we talked about many weeks ago. It might have even been at the beginning of the season. Memphis, a team that I was really high on coming into the season. Memphis, I think, has just been very good throughout the course of the season. Obviously, they're 10-1. So is Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati is one of the worst 10-1 teams I've ever seen as far as just in a somewhat big conference. Obviously, it's not the SEC or the Big Ten or anything like that, but And to be honest with you, I kind of like Cincinnati. It's not a team that I dislike by any means, but they're just not that good. If Cincinnati pulls an upset here or something of that nature, I would be inclined to go against them. And I also would look to go against them possibly in their bowl game. I just think this Cincinnati team, even though the odds makers have clearly adjusted, I still think they might be a bit overvalued by the betting public. So Cincinnati, a team I'm looking to go against. Kind of the short of it is, I would say that I wish I could have bet Memphis in this one, but the number is just so high.
Yeah, the number is too high. I mean, I made an adjustment to Cincinnati because, look, the Bearcats have been outgained in 6 of their last 7 games, and they've won every one of them. And they've been outgained badly in some of those games. They were outgained by Temple again last week. I think that East Carolina outgained them by, I want to say, 160 yards or something like that in the game a couple of weeks ago. Cincinnati has been outgained. Here it is. 5 of the last 6, not including last week's game, by 82, 30, 60, 176, and 160. And they had won all 5 of those games, added another one to the ledger here this past weekend against Temple. This is a fraudulent 10-1 team. The defense is very good, and they bailed them out at times. But also, the defense has given up some yardage, too. They gave up over 600 yards against East Carolina. Tulsa moved the ball on them. Several teams have moved the ball on them. Memphis is going to move the ball on them. And maybe this is one where I just have to suck it up and play it. My line's 8.5 on the game. It is 10.5 or 11 out there. And again, Cincinnati knows that they have a second bite at the apple here, really, because even if they lose this game, they're still in the conference title game. They wouldn't get to the New Year's Six Bowl. I don't think they're going to get there anyway. So, maybe Cincinnati doesn't show a whole lot in this game. Maybe they want that conference title more than that New Year's Six Bowl game. Maybe they kind of pack it away, run the football, play very vanilla. Whereas Memphis has to win this game, because if Navy beats Houston, and they certainly should, Navy would win the West Division if Memphis lost. So for Memphis here, maybe they get up early. Maybe Memphis first half is the play here, because they could get up early, pack it away. Both teams basically play with a running clock in the second half. But it's got to be Memphis or nothing here. I see no scenario where I could possibly envision taking Cincinnati this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Memphis first half could be a good look in this game. And honestly, as you were talking about it, I thought, that makes quite a bit of sense to me, because Cincinnati's going to be very vanilla, partially because Desmond Ritter's not 100%. And like you said, they might be vanilla for other reasons as well. I would say that if you want to bet Memphis in this game, even though my line's only 10, like you said, your line is a little bit lower. I mean, I don't think this number is going to come back down. Do you? I mean, I think minus 11 and a half even showing now. This one opened at 10.5. I think this number will only go up.
Yeah, this is probably the best we get. And yeah, even the 10.5s are gone out there now too. So it's 11 or higher out there, and it probably just keeps going. And maybe Luke Fickell comes out and says, hey, our quarterback's hurt. We're not going to really put him at risk in this game. At that point, then what happens? 14? I think that's a possibility. So, yeah, if you like Memphis, I think you kind of have to get this one sooner rather than later. But I will also mention, keep an eye on the weather forecast, because weather could be a factor here in a game like this on Friday as well. We move to Saturday here, and this will be the last thing we talk about on the college football side. Ohio State and that team up north. Ohio State, anywhere from an 8.5 to a 9.5 point favorite, depending on where you look. But you and I were texting each other a lot during the Ohio State-Penn State game over the weekend. It wasn't a great look for the Buckeyes. Now, that being said, they outgained Penn State. They held Penn State to 3.55 yards per play. They fumbled at the goal line, had a drop in the end zone, missed an open guy in the end zone, had the 2 fumbles that really made this into a game where Penn State took advantage of some short fields. Ohio State very easily could have covered that game. So how do we evaluate all of this that we saw from the Buckeyes, and how do we evaluate what the Wolverines did last weekend blowing out Indiana?
Yeah, first thing I wanted to say is, what was this line a few weeks ago? Wasn't the look-ahead line for this game like 13.5 or something like that? I'm pretty sure that this line was significantly higher than this. Do you know what that one was offhand? I think it was close to 2 touchdowns.
Westgate had it 13.5 as recently as last week.
Yeah. So a big adjustment. I have to say that I'm always wary of that big of an adjustment from one game. I certainly think an adjustment should have been made. I think that Ohio State didn't play very well in that last game. Michigan, I'll go ahead and say Michigan. I don't really want to, but Michigan did play well there in that last game. And I have to say that, if you look at the trajectory of the two teams, Ohio State really didn't play very well against Rutgers, didn't play their best against Penn State. Michigan has played really well here of late. Harbaugh has this team playing good football. As a Buckeyes fan, I am nervous about this game. This is a Michigan team that started the year off not playing very well. When it seemed like their season really changed was the second half of that Penn State game. They came back, had a real chance to win that game, didn't win it, blew out Notre Dame, obviously beat Michigan State handily. And then at Indiana, where they're losing 14-7 in the first quarter, they just pound them the rest of the game. So to me, Michigan, a team that, is certainly a scary team here. As I said to you beforehand, I would still be cautious to bet Michigan. You're not getting 13.5 points or anything now. And Jim Harbaugh hasn't proven he could win games like this yet. Can he win those? Certainly. I think that there's a real chance Michigan could pull the upset here. Obviously, as a Buckeyes fan, I hope that doesn't happen. I do think Ohio State's the better team. It concerns me. Several things that concern me about Ohio State, and I think you and I could probably talk about this game for a long time, so I'll try to keep it at least somewhat brief. But, Ohio State's play calling on Saturday was really disappointing to me. I wonder if it's going to be that way in a tight game all the time, and I certainly hope not. If Ohio State's just happy to run the ball 61 times or 60 sometimes like they did the other day, only throw it 20 sometimes, I'm a little bit worried for them. I think Michigan's going to be ready for the run game. Ohio State's going to have to complete some long passes. Fields is clearly not 100%. Dobbins is a great running back, but I don't think we can become too predictable. These two teams, both very good teams. Michigan is just desperate to win a game like this. Ohio State should obviously be extremely motivated for this game. And you could argue that maybe having that close game last week for Ohio State was a good thing. I guess we'll see. I want to hear some of your thoughts about this one too.
Yeah, you do have to worry about what's going on with Ohio State in the play calling. You have to worry about the status of Justin Fields, because Justin Fields was very clearly way less than 100% after that game on Saturday. The left hand, who knows what's going on with that? The tackle at the end where he smashed his knee into the turf and had his ankle kind of turned a little bit. He is way less than 100%. And if the game plan here is to follow what Urban Meyer did and use the quarterback run, use the read option, some design quarterback, runs out of empty sets, I don't love that idea. I don't love that idea against the Wolverines. And I get it. Look, Harbaugh soils his khakis every year in this game, and he does it in all the big games. So I understand that there's a certain level of confidence there for the Buckeyes, and probably a certain level of confidence from Day. Now, of course, you do have Greg Madison, the defensive coordinator, who knows the Wolverines personnel very, very well. Although Josh Gaddis has done a fantastic job with this offense. In the second half, Shea Patterson looks a little bit more comfortable. They get the ball out quick. If Patterson makes quick decisions and stops that Ohio State pass rush by getting rid of the football, the Buckeyes struggle to cover the same stuff that they have success with on offense. They have a hard time with crossing routes, pick routes, mesh routes, rub routes, because their linebackers don't cover all that well. So that's the worry for me here, is that I think what the Wolverines have done well in the second half of the season, those are the areas in which Ohio State struggles. Now, of course, on the other side of the coin, there's a reason Ohio State wins this game year in and year out. They're the better team, the faster team, the more talented team, and the better coach team. So does all of that add up to Ohio State covering almost double digits? I don't think so. My line on the game is 9. If I had to play it, partial emotional hedge, would take the Wolverines here. I'm not going to bet this game, but I saw a lot of disturbing things from Ohio State last week, as you mentioned. Now, maybe the weather was a big factor, but yeah, you're talking about a Penn State defense that had allowed, 2 yards per carry on the season, and you ran the ball 61 times at them? That's concerning to me.
Yeah, I agree. That Penn State's secondary is clearly their weakness, and yet, didn't try to exploit it. I thought that was disappointing. And once Ohio State had a lead, we don't need to go conservative when we're ahead by, 11 points or whatever it was. It seemed like Ohio State was very cautious in that game. One thing I'll say as far as the Michigan offense, Ohio State's defense is really good at not giving up big plays. First in the country in allowed plays of 30 yards or more, only 7 so far this year, which is first in the country, and that is tremendous. Only 7 plays of 30 yards or more in that long of the season. Ohio State is very good in the secondary, well coached in the secondary. They don't give up the big plays. Can Michigan consistently move the ball down the field little by little? I think that's the key here. I don't think we'll see a lot of big plays from Michigan. If so, it would surprise me based on what these two teams have done. Michigan only has 21 plays of 30 yards or more on the season, which is 81st best in the country. So they haven't really been a big play offense. I think what you said earlier is really key here too. Ohio State's pass rush. We know that Ohio State's pass rush is really, really good. Chase Young, probably the best player in the country in general. 47 sacks for Ohio State so far this year. Michigan has given up a decent amount, 20 sacks. So, Patterson's got to get rid of the ball here because, he's not going to be able to think twice and be okay with it here. I think Michigan's offensive line is decent, but Ohio State's defensive line has a clear edge there. So, if they run the offense where he gets it out quick enough, they could have some success. If Patterson gets nervous and is holding the ball too long, it's bad news for Michigan. As far as what I would do with this game, I don't think anything in this game really interests me that much to bet. You tend to wonder about taking unders in a game like this, but both teams are playing faster than they did in the past. And I mean, I would think that there could be a decent amount of points just because of the tempo here. I honestly, like you, I guess if I had to pick something in this game, I would probably take Michigan plus the points. If I was getting more than 10, I would lean stronger that way. But this is not that many points. And like I said, also, I don't love making that big of a line adjustment just from one game. So I'm going to stay away from this one.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, we could talk about this game till we're blue in the face. But also, too, for Ohio State here, I mean, when they ran into some adversity, they didn't handle it all that well. I mean, it looks to me like they need to play from in front. Whether they're not confident in Justin Fields as a passer or something else, they've got to play from in front. And even then, you were talking with me about this. They weren't going hurry up. They were milking clock, and that's not what they do. That's not what they should be doing on offense. They've got to keep going. They've got to play aggressively. There are far too many coaches out there in college football and the NFL that play not to lose. You've got to play to win the effing game. You've got to keep doing what you do and what you have success with. And that could be the one saving grace here for the Buckeyes. Last year, they got that big lead in this game, and they just kept going. They just kept doing whatever they wanted to do on offense. If Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson go into a shell in this game, it is going to be to the Buckeyes' detriment. So that concerns me. Maybe from a live betting standpoint, you can kind of look into that here in the second half. If they play not to lose, they're going to find a way to lose this game, I think. And obviously, that's the worst case scenario for you and I. For anybody out there that has Ohio State national championship futures or something like that, those may still be alive, depending on if they play Minnesota or Wisconsin in the conference championship game. But they've got to play to win. They've got to play to be aggressive. Let your dudes on the outside make plays, man. J.K. Dobbins is great. Master Teague is great. Let Chris Olave, let KJ Hill, let Garrett Wilson go one-on-one and make you a damn play. You got a 5-star guy out there. Let him do what he does. Let Fields throw it up. Go make some plays. Get out of this damn shell that you were in. I don't know if they can do that. I haven't seen enough from Ryan Day or the Buckeyes in a close game to be confident.
Yeah, I think that's true that, we haven't seen enough from Ohio State in close games. They were blowing out everybody. Like I said, you could make the argument that it was good that they played a close game last week because now they've at least been tested. But you don't really like the way that they played at the end of that game because they were so cautious, like you said. And definitely when you play not to lose, it's more often that you lose than if you just keep playing the way you normally do. One final thing I would say, special teams-wise in this game, Ohio State with a pretty big edge. Ohio State 18th, according to S&P in special teams. Michigan 52nd. In a game that could be very close at the end of the game, that's something that could factor into this one as well.